Call to order the Gurnee Village Board meeting, January 10, 2022. Roll call, please.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Woodside. Here. Ross. Here. Garner.
Here.
O'Brien.
Present.
Balmas. 6 present.
You all stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just want to make a short acknowledgement. I'm sure many of you have heard that Hank Salemi passed away over the weekend, the Six Flags park president. I would just say that he was, and Six Flags have been, a great partner for us over the years, and certainly Hank was one of those partners. So we just extend our condolences to his family and just recognize the loss to the community. And that's it, but just really want to acknowledge that just a shocking loss for us. So we just start with a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Balmas, second by Trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Woodside. Aye. Ross. Aye. Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas. Aye. 6 aye.
Motion carries. Pat?
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the December 20th, 2021 meeting. Item number 2, approval and public release of minutes from executive closed session meetings on May 17, 2021, June 7, 2021, and July 19, 2021. Item number 3, approval of ordinance 2022-01, approving the plat of easement which grants a water main easement to the Village of Gurnee at 5675 Center Point Court. Item number 4, approval of setting a bid date of January 20th, 2022 for the Cemetery Road Pump Station Roof Replacement Project. Item number 5, approval of payroll for period ending December 17, 2021 in the amount of $865,727.60. Item number 6, approval of payroll period ending December 31st, 2021 in the amount of $905,780.96. Item number 7, approval of bills for period ending January 10, 2022 in the amount of $2,370,682.46.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee O'Brien, second by Trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Woodside. Aye. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas. 6 aye.
Motion carries. Now to petitions and communications. Approval of proclamation designating January 17, 2022 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the Village of Gurnee. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has made a lasting impression as a key leader in the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s and 1960s. His outstanding leadership, inspiring speeches, and diligent efforts on behalf of our nation's at-risk and minority population have encouraged millions of Americans to share his dream of civil equality to bring this dream closer to reality. The campaign for a federal holiday in Dr. King's honor began soon after his assassination in 1968. Ronald Reagan signed the holiday into law in 1983, and it was first observed on January 20, 1986. It was officially observed in all 50 states for the first time in year 2000. The Village of Gurnee recognizes Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day each year to remind us of the important role he played in advancing freedom and opportunity for all. Now, therefore, I, Thomas Hood, Mayor of the Village of Gurnee, do hereby proclaim January 17, 2022 to be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the Village of Gurnee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Ross, second by Trustee Thorstensen. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. On to reports. Presentation by Finance Director Brian Gosnell. Brian?
All right, thank you, Mayor. First report tonight is just a quick review of the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended April 30, 2021. I guess I'll start off by noting a terminology change. When it comes to this report, we used to refer to it as the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR. The GFOA put out some guidance. They were alerted that the guess, pronunciation of that acronym is actually a derogatory term in certain parts of the world, so we are switching and just referring it to either the annual financial report or the annual comprehensive financial report moving forward. So those two things will equal what it used to be. It's the final piece in the planning and reporting process cycle. Includes audited financial statements by Lauterbach and Amon. They've been the village's auditors for, I want to say, close to 15 years now. I know they just finished their last updated 5 years. 5-year contract term. We'll be changing out the whole audit team next year. That is a recommended best practice by the GFOA, so that will happen next year. We'll have all new people on our team. Document really includes 3 sections. The introductory section, that includes the org chart transmittal letter, which is written by us, and then the GFOA award, the financial section, which includes the auditor's report and their opinion, the MD&A, which is the management discussion analysis. Again, that's written by staff. The actual financial statements, and then the required supplementary information. And then finally, the statistical section, which is prepared by staff. It's a 10-year look at certain financial information, some operating indicators, and it's really kind of a neat section to see the differences between now and 10 years ago if you take a look at it. First, starting off, audited financial statements. The first statement you come to in the report is the statement of net position and activities, a statement of activities. That's your traditional balance sheet and income statement. These two are a little different. This kind of went into effect, I want to say, mid-2000s with the change. Breaks the whole government down into two sections, governmental activities and business type activities. Our business type activities are our water and sewer fund and our golf fund. It's a little bit different on how it measures resources. It's compiled on the economic resources measurement focus, which means it includes the value of capital assets, things like roads, sidewalks, things like that. Obviously, we're never going to monetize that or need to monetize that. So some of these statements are a little, probably not as helpful as the other ones. So it also includes long-term debt obligations, long-term pension obligations, OPEB liability, which is other post-employment benefits. You'll see that noted as RBP, which is retiree benefits plan. And then new this year is asset retirement obligations. This is a new GASB pronouncement that was implemented. Basically, we have to record the cost of taking an asset out of service, and this is mostly related to the water system. So down the line, when that asset has reached its useful life, there's a cost for taking it out of service. We have to record that. The second set of statements is what we call the fund financial statements. This is the more traditional ones that we use and talk about. Reports fund balance. It's on the financial resources measurement focus, which means it's things that we have or are going to have like in the next 90-day window. More spendable resources, not so much capital assets and things like that. This is also where we see the reporting of fund balance that we use for our fund balance policy and measurement of a number of things. If you look at page 43 in the report, that's really the income statement. I just wanted to focus on the general fund and hit some of those highlights. Revenues, just almost $37.7 million. That does include the CARES Act money that we received, $1.4 million, if you remember that. There was a decision by the county to share some of that federal stimulus. Expenditures, just over $38.2 million. That leaves us with a net change of a negative $520,523. So for the 2-year audited financial statements that were impacted by COVID thus far, that's a total drawdown of fund balance of just over $1.5 million. If you remember, our original projections when we first started were between 5 and 7 million. Obviously 1.5 was way better, but if you discount the CARES Act money, we're closer to 3 million is where we would have ended up. Obviously, we didn't anticipate getting any federal stimulus when we started, so. But either way, it's finished in a very good spot compared to where we thought we'd be. Looking at the bottom of that statement, you'll see the fund balance. There's a few different categories: unspendable, restricted, committed, and unassigned. We have two categories populated: unspendable, which is inventory. That's really the value of the salt that we have in the domes. Fund balance in total, $25.2 million. Unassigned, 24.9, almost 25 million. As a percentage of budget expenditures, that brings us to 59.7%. ARPA funds, just as a note, that money, which was 4.13 million over 2 years, it does not affect this fiscal year. That'll affect fiscal year 22 and 23. So that'll come in this year and next year. But just a couple notes, we got a 10-year history there on that bottom graph of general fund balance. As you can see, it dipped down and then back up, and it's fairly stable. But I would point out a couple things here. We did pay off the Series 2011 bonds, fiscal year '20. That was like almost $3.5 million that we used to do that. And then we've transferred during this time period, on average, $1 million a year, $10 million in total to capital. So we haven't just been kind of putting money away for a rainy day. We've been maintaining our fund balance, of course, but also putting surpluses to use. So just a couple of other notes in the report, particularly since we're talking about capital coming up, I wanted to hit fund balances in a couple other funds. Obviously, with COVID, we had put some things on hold, so you'll see some balances build up here in the motor fuel tax fund. That went from just over $500,000 to 1.4. In the capital improvement fund, from 2.2 2 years ago to 4.3. $1 million of that is for the Warren Waukegan donation to the fire station 3. And then the water fund, we've been drawing that down over a number of years per our capital plan, so you see that come down and then stabilize. We will draw that down just a little bit more with this capital plan, but we have a significant program planned for fiscal year '23. And then fleet services fund was new last year, and then obviously with COVID, we delayed some vehicle purchases, so that left us a little balance in there this year that we will then use in fiscal year '23 for vehicle purchases. From management letter, two more things in the statements. You'll notice that the debt service fund is zeroed out. Obviously, that's paid off, so that fund goes to zero, and the SSA number 2 fund expired, so that goes to zero as well in the statements. Management letter, only current recommendation is just some advice on a GASB statement that next year is when we will need to implement it, or I should say fiscal year '22 audit is when we'll need to implement that. So that's just auditor saying you need to do this. We'll look at it next year. But other than that, there's no other management letter comments. And with that, happy to take any questions on the report, or we'll go into the capital plan.
Somebody to my right, do you have any questions? To the left? Apparently not. Brian, continue on.
Keep rolling. All right, so multi-year capital plan, fiscal year '23 to '27. So this kind of gives us initially a preview of what we're going to talk about in the upcoming budget, but also gives us a plan for over the next 5 years. Typically, we do this in conjunction with the multi-year financial forecast. Missed a little bit of time. We're still finalizing that one. Going to present that with the third quarter report. We've done enough research on the financial forecast side to know what we can afford for the capital plan. So really, at this point, it's just presenting a document and the numbers. That is less important to the budget process that's underway right now. So we thought we'd get the capital plan out in front of it. Capital plan obviously identifies long-term strategy, provides a scope of what we're responsible for, and you'll see that as we go through the different systems. Also, as I said, gives us a preview of what the upcoming budget will entail. Looking at the 5-year total, it's $59.7 million over the 5 years. That is up from previous versions, largely due to some additional motor fuel tax funds, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Chart on the pie chart there shows you just how it's broken down by fund. Obviously, the capital improvement fund, the fleet services fund, and the motor fuel tax fund give us that transportation system, non-water and sewer capital. So that's going to be the biggest ones, followed by the water and sewer, and then a couple of smaller funds. From a funding strategy standpoint, kind of the direction we've got from the board and what we've been doing is pay as you go whenever possible, try to eliminate as much debt as we can. The only debt we have out is for the Knowles Road Tower and Fire Station 3. And the Fire Station 3 debt, we have a plan to pay that down fairly quick. We obviously have the 0.5% home rule sales tax that's dedicated to capital. Motor fuel taxes are restricted for capital. Included in the plan is transfer of general fund surplus of only $500,000 a year. If you remember that chart I just showed you with the fund balance, we were averaging $1 million. So tried to be a little more conservative there. We also have restricted funds, PD restricted funds. 911 is restricted to how that can be used. Obviously, motor fuel taxes, so we use those. Water and sewer capital is funded by rates. Try to get grants whenever we can. And then if we do have to finance something, make it as flexible as possible so we can pay it off as quick as we can. Looking more at fiscal year '23, capital plan, almost 18 million. It's the largest one that I was able to find on record here, even with the Knowles Tower and the Fire Station 3 stuff coming on. Transportation system is the largest category, 7.5 million. Some of these things are carryover from the COVID year. Obviously, we took a pause on a bunch of things, so those will carry over to this new year. Water and sewer system is second, 4.1 million. Vehicles and equipment, 3.6. Technology, if you remember, 2 years ago, we split that category out of vehicles and equipment. Total is 1.9. Building and improvements, 513,000, and stormwater management, 300,000. So a couple of things we'll see to keep in mind when we go through the plan is the carryover, obviously, of COVID. There were some things that we had delayed last year that will move into this year. In a couple areas, we tried to get ahead of the supply chain crisis and budget in a way that would keep us moving, or keep us in line and in front of the line for certain things, particularly vehicles. And then on the transportation side, which we'll talk about more when we get there, we wanted to build a plan that we could handle with the engineering staff we have on. As you know, that department has had some turnover in the last few years, so we wanted to be able to have a plan that we could efficiently or effectively oversee, while we're doing that, so with the staff that we have on hand. Just looking at how it breaks down by fund, and what the funding sources of that are. So obviously the capital improvement fund, as I said, is the largest one. That's where we see the home rule sales tax and the general fund surplus. Water and sewer, that's the water and sewer rates. Motor fuel taxes, I was talking about, we saw that increase. We actually have, part of that is because of the increase in the motor fuel tax itself. And then the Rebuild Illinois is the capital program from the state that we get a portion of over the next 3 years. 3 years. So we see those things coming in. Obviously bolsters our transportation system spending. Fleet services fund, that is actually funded by a transfer from the capital improvement fund and the water and sewer fund to fund vehicle replacements. With the only exception with that is fire. 911 fund, PD restricted funds in the golf course fund. We have a small amount there. If you remember, any amusement tax that the golf course generates, we put back in that fund for improvements. With that, I'll hand it over to Heather. She's going to walk us through the transportation system.
All right, so for the transportation system, we'll start with first, as Brian mentioned, one of the largest portions of the capital plan. The village maintains approximately 146 miles of pedestrian facilities, and back in 2015, the Blue Ribbon Commission was established and came up with a priority list of locations. So every year we try to make progress towards completing some of those through the budget. The village also maintains an equivalent of 128 centerline miles of roadways. 80% of those are curb and gutter. The other 20% are rural sections with ditches. Here on the map, you can kind of see what we call the pavement condition index. We have that evaluated every 3 years. The colors of yellow and green indicate good to fair conditions, while the purple and red are poor to failing conditions. So ideally, we'd like to maintain roads in the 40 to 60 rating. Once we get beyond 40, it gets progressively more expensive to repair those roads because it leads to a full reconstruction as opposed to just doing a surface replacement. That gets further complicated when you leave a road and it has cracks in it, and then there's freeze-thaw cycles, and then it kind of beats up the base and makes it more expensive. So now we'll get into a little bit more of the details. For $6.5 million, what does that include? The entire resurfacing will include about 4.4 miles. Reconstruction will equate to about 1.2 miles. There'll be various patching locations, both inside those limits and outside. And we will pay for the pavement evaluation that we do every 3 years out of those funds. We also have slated to set aside $150,000 for pavement markings. So even on some of the roads that don't get reconstructed or repaved or resurfaced, they will get freshened up as well. And so next slide for more details. Getting into the roads, resurfacing is denoted in red, and orange is reconstruction. I'll read off the streets because I know it's not super clear on there, but for resurfacing, we have Swanson, the south end of Northwestern, Perrette, Old Grand, First, and Waveland, and for reconstruction there we show Keith. Next slide, we have resurfacing in the Kensington subdivision and reconstruction on Elm, the frontage road on the south side of Washington Street. First Street, Delaney, and Oglesby will all get reconstructed. Moving on, we have resurfacing included on several streets and cul-de-sacs in Westgate, Pembroke, and Victorian Village. Those streets specifically are Liberty, Quincy, Madison, Franklin, Ironwood, Ashwood, Cherrywood, Butternut, and Garnett. And then finally, resurfacing here includes roads in Elysian Fields and Orchard Valley, specifically Mendocino and Lockwood. So moving on from roads, we have about $200,000 incorporated in the fiscal year '23 budget for sidewalk improvements. This includes the path along Knowles Road, which connects Clavey to Rollins. This would be an 8-foot wide pedestrian path. We're also working with Lake Dot to leverage some of their intersection projects. So they have the Washington and Hunt Club project where we'll get some path extensions out of that, as well as the Stearns and 41 intersection project. Moving on from there, we have $128,000 set aside for streetlight capital. So this includes LEDs in the Aberdare subdivision, new streetlights along Morrison Drive, and a relocation of an important electrical cabinet at Almond and Data. Next, we have $155,000 in the annual sidewalk maintenance. So over every 5 years, we try to tackle 1/5 of the village. This is year 3 of that program, so we're in Zone 3, which is the pink area shown here on the very west end of town. We go out and we do sidewalk inspections. So when there's displacement in excess of what we deem acceptable, we remove and replace those sidewalks as part of this budget. For things that are less intense or that can be just ground down to be more smooth, we have a grinder on hand and we tackle those as needed throughout the year, but this is more capital replacement type projects. So moving on from transportation to stormwater, here's a map of our stormwater conveyance system. As you can see, it's very extensive. We have 135 miles of storm sewer pipe and over 250 detention basins in the village. The village of Gurnee, we are a certified community, so we're qualified to enforce the Lake County Watershed Development Ordinance within the village limits, and we work hand in hand with Lake County Stormwater Management with respect to acquiring floodplain properties whenever possible. Capital projects in this category include those that both maintain the existing system or improve conveyance, which can be seen on the next slide with next year's plan. So here we have $300,000 set aside. The first project for $125,000 is culvert work on Grove Road. So here, the existing culverts that cross that road cannot handle all of the flows on the really intense storms. So we're looking to replace the existing with 2 18-inch culverts, which will help hopefully prevent how often it overtops when it gets to be a significant rain event. We also have fit in the budget to continue, as I mentioned earlier, to procure floodplain properties, and finally set aside about $25,000 for failing storm sewer that we discover throughout the year. Moving on to the water and sanitary sewer system, it's been in place since around the 1960s. Back in 1992, we were one of the original members of the Central Lake County Joint Action Water Agency, so we got Lake Michigan water delivered to the village of Gurnee. At present time, we own, operate, and maintain 182 miles of water main and 145 miles of sanitary sewer, including 8 sanitary sewer lift stations. And the sewer system collects and transmits the sewage to the Lake County Public Works transmission main, or in other instances, directly to North Shore Water Reclamation District for treatment. So with our capital improvements in this category, those include projects that maintain existing water main, sanitary sewer, and all their appurtenances, so valves, hydrants, manholes, et cetera. At times, this includes evaluation of the system as well and different components. So that could include upgrades to our supervisory and data control cabinets, which is SCADA, the acronym for SCADA. That keeps our system operating within normal parameters and sets like auto alerts that notify the on-call staff whenever there's an emergency that needs immediate attention. Some of the highlights for fiscal year '23 include Lawrence Avenue water main removal and replacement and the Route 21 water main loop, which will liven up the main that's south of Fire Station number 3. It will also include $1.5 million for new sewer and sanitary sewer and water main, along Juniper Street and in that area. It also includes working closely with the Lake Dot and the state, as I kind of mentioned earlier. We have $870,000 for water main at the intersection of Hunt Club and Washington Street, as well as the Stern School Road at 41. So our main would be under brand-new pavement, and rather than letting that take place without replacing our water main, we petitioned for them to do that, and they've been receptive. So we have $870,000 for that. We also included $280,000 for enhancement to our electrical cabinets, to standardize those at all of our lift stations and improve those that are failing, as well as $225,000 in SCADA system upgrades to help with optimizing the system functioning properly. We've added a lot of components over time, and so we just want to make sure that it's still running in the most efficient way possible. And every year, we set aside for design engineering for the following year, so that's the $60,000 we have there, as well as bringing back $150K for sanitary sewer and televising. So this is when we hire a contractor to come out, they TV the mains, they create reports that follow standard guidelines for sewer assessment, and then we go ahead and put together a bid to line those mains that don't require digging. It's more in situ type of work. And then with that, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
All right. Should pause for questions or keep rolling?
What do you think?
Is there, whatever, if there's questions about the.
Yeah, why don't we, it might be easiest to do questions, yeah. Does anybody have questions for Heather?
Is that all we have to do?
Sure.
Okay.
Again,
Great presentation, Heather, that was good. Very good.
Thanks.
we'll see all this again when we get through the budget, but really just a preview of what we got coming up here. Moving on, vehicles and equipment. Obviously, this includes vehicles, heavy equipment, upfitting costs. We have a total of 124 pieces of equipment, roughly $17.6 million in value. You won't see administration or community development vehicles on here. We have a program where we roll those down from the police department. Obviously, when we look at what needs to be replaced, take into account a few factors: mileage, engine hours, physical condition. You may have a vehicle in Public Works, actually, that has very, very low miles but is falling apart. And on the other side of the spectrum, you may see something in the police department that it looks very new but has 100,000 miles on it. So it's just how those vehicles are used. Repair and maintenance costs. And then last year, we added a module to our CFA system, which is the fleet management software, that kind of takes all that and puts it into a scoring model that will rank these for us. So putting another layer of kind of data analytics on top of, what we can see and already know. Do you want to add anything about the software onto that, or?
Well, we do have an example report that Craig has brought, so if you guys want to see it at the end of the meeting, he's more than happy to share that with you.
So that was new last year. Just getting into the highlights here of the 23 program, $3.6 million. Police department have three squad cars, 1 evidence tech vehicle, 4 unmarked vehicles, and 2 CSO vehicles. Some of the unmarked will include the PD restricted funds, so that's not all just general capital money. $95,000 for a mobile generator. That'll actually be used in conjunction with Public Works. We'll see it again on a Public Works slide, but we can use that at the police station as a third backup for run the communication center or police department if something should happen. $75,000 for evidence tracking and gear. On the fire side, $750,000 for an engine, $290,000 for an ambulance, which was a rollover from last year. $162,000 I had included in here just for potential grants. That's kind of what we have in the hopper now. We'll know more when we get to the budget, whether we have, we've been awarded those or not. $55,000 for a command vehicle, and then $30,000 for the warning sirens and the preemption system that we have in there every year. On the Public Works side, $1.1 million for 4 trucks. Here's where I was talking about getting ahead of the supply chain, budgeting for 4 here to keep us moving along. Maybe a situation where we have to kind of put in for all those at once. $213,000 for a small loader. Again, all of these vehicles are split between water and sewer and the capital improvement fund. $165,000 for a backhoe combo machine. $95,000, that's the other side of the mobile generator. I should have mentioned on the last slide that for the police portion of that, we will be asking the joint ETSB, since it's a backup for the communication center, to help us fund part of that. So I didn't want to include that in here. Obviously, that's a decision that's made by a different board, so we'll see what happens when we get to that point. But that will have a budget impact when we get there. $90,000 for a mini excavator, $60,000 for a jetter machine. That's the Public Works portion. Moving into technology, I'm gonna do my best here, and then Chris can bail me out. This includes server storage equipment, phone collaboration systems, obviously network equipment, internet services, SCADA that Heather had just talked about, control system security, both cyber and physical. Really, when we look at what we're doing here, it's operational efficiency from that standpoint. You know, what applications or systems can make us more efficient in what we do process-wise. Data analytics and insight. Obviously, data's king. The more data that we have available to us, the better. The more data that we have available to the public, the better. Increasing transparency. Process transformation. This, from a finance standpoint, I can speak to this since we just redid our finance software in the last few years here. We've seen dramatic changes in our processes. It's gone almost completely digital, everything almost. Not to mention the services that we were able to offer online for not only businesses but residents and things like that. And then really balancing enterprise-wide needs and department-specific needs. So there, you know, it used to be you'd buy an application to replace a spreadsheet. Now you buy 5 applications to replace a spreadsheet, and you got to give everybody access to the data anytime, anywhere, whenever they want it, you know, any way they want to access it. So those things have changed quite a bit over the years. And on top of all that, got to make sure it's secure. So with that, I'll let Chris go over some of the highlights here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Maybe looking at some trends, since we're trying to look multi-years into the future for this. I think you really see a trend toward expenditures related to services and subscriptions, less on physical hardware and equipment items. Capital expenditures will be still existing, but somewhat of decreasing importance. You'll see more cost driven in the recurring and operating budgets. This is an industry trend. The vendors are all looking for this. They don't want the big one-time payout and then a small maintenance amount. They want a steady revenue stream, a subscription, and to have customers that are more tightly coupled with their customers. If you take just as an example of how we've moved from the big expenditures to the ongoing, I would point to our GIS program. That used to be expensive hardware that was unique and one of a kind, airplane flights, photo interpretation, all kinds of big one-time capital expenditures if you go back a number of years. Now we're looking at software subscription models, data collection done by a whole bunch of departments, shared data with the county where they do those flights and we just participate in that. So it's a continuing investment, but it's not these one-time hitters. It's staffing, it's subscriptions, it's services. It's more of a baked into the operating side. Another trend is that we see that replacement of hardware and equipment is less of a function of obsolescence or it being worn out as it is a lack of support and security updates. So now we need to really do those change outs based on the availability of those updates, patches, and those type of things. So that's a driver, and that's baked into our 5-year plan here for what we know hits its end-of-life dates. That's a big thing that you'll hear a lot about with a lot of IT equipment at this point. Director Gosnell mentioned security. We continue to believe that security in depth remains the strongest approach, that multiple layers, secure at every point. There's no silver bullet or box you're going to buy or single application that's going to be a solution there, but look at each system, each component, look at its exposure and its risk. We see now there are exploits in devices that you never would have thought would have been attacked by a hacker, but they're looking for a way in, and then once they're in, they're looking for lateral movement to move from something unimportant over to something that's important. So we have certain things built into the plan for that. The last trend I would say is that when you figure the cost of ownership of these systems, given how dependent we are on them on an ongoing basis, coupled with the targeting by the bad actors that are out there, the model of technology is simply a cost savings device is really being displaced by a better total cost of ownership. And when you buy into one of these systems, what is my cost really going to be to maintain it over time? Looking specifically at at some of the items in both the overall enterprise plan and department-specific. One of our steady areas of investment has been in network equipment and applications. We split this between the utility and general funds. Coming up here, we're in need of replacing a number of pieces of router equipment out on our network, which connects buildings together, and our wireless networks inside of all of our buildings. We have 115 access points, even the 18 newest of which will all need to be replaced by 2025. So as we do multi-year financial forecasts, we're putting in to replace those in a steady stream so that they're not all at once. Another major category on the enterprise side is virtualization and storage. We have replacement of server hardware that hosts our virtualized server environment. That area is composed of compute power, storage, and networking. Networking we kind of handle as a separate thing. Storage we've addressed very well over the last couple of years. This tends to be a little more lumpy, where you get every 5 years you're refreshing things, and the server part of it is up for that renewal. We'll see if we can get that done this year. It may bleed over to next year based on supply chain. That equipment's located at the police station and Village Hall primarily, and a little bit at Public Works. We're also looking to bolster the storage for some of our backup locations as we're hedging our bets against ransomware and disaster recovery type things. We want to make sure that data is stored in multiple locations, multiple formats. Specifically in the area of security, looking at managing devices coming on and off of our network and doing that in a controlled manner, looking at bolstering our servers that sit between us and the internet so they're in a environment that's secure and provides some separation. That's something we've been doing for a long time, but there's some dollars plugged in relation to that. There's also an enterprise software application. As much as finance has moved forward with a whole bunch of really solid areas on ERP, I think fixed asset tracking is one that we're looking to pick up as part of the capital plan. Those are kind of the big across all of the department type areas. And then maybe we'll touch on a couple that are more department specific. Each department maintains a certain number of physical security items, door access control, IP video cameras, stuff like that. Currently, we have 176 cameras. We inventoried all those and stratified them by what year they'll need to be replaced, plugged that into the plan, and came up with an amount for each department per year that we need to do for those camera replacements. It'll be a lot more straightforward than when we originally put them in. They're all pre-wired, ready to go. Swap out old model, new model, and we're on our way. There are audiovisual changes that include for this building, sound reinforcement for this room. In the longer term, probably some of the video components, and I believe the projector with the speckles is one of them that we're looking to take on. Another one that'll be a significant expenditure is a rework of the public website. Jack Linehan will be spearheading that as he did the last go-round on it, but is definitely plugged into the plan. Moving on to police and communications, Brian highlighted that we have $1.9 million overall in the plan. Almost $1 million of that is the computer-aided dispatch and police records management system. We're working hand in hand with the county and all the departments in Lake County that have come together on a joint project for that, but we continue to earmark those dollars until such point in time as that has come to fruition. I would fully expect that we'll have success with that Lake County plan, but until it happens, we're reserving those dollars. So that's just something to factor in the total. There's also built into that mobile data computers, specifically in the fire department. We have some older units that are end of life, and we need to stay on top of that to get them replaced in accordance to the final software end of life dates for that. There are also AV improvements in the police department. In the fire department, we're looking to make some notification improvements for Fire Station 2 and Fire Station 1 in line with the things we did at Fire Station 3. There's also potentially incorporating some building changes at Fire Station 1 and the follow-on work for alerting and networking and things like that, should that come to pass toward the end of the fiscal year. Heather mentioned the SCADA system improvements. That's something that we have budgeted for a number of years. I'll use the unpopular phrase, we've kicked the can a number of times on that. I'm more confident with Heather Galan as the director and Nick as our engineer, that we have the people in place to take the interest in that and help carry that forward. We can play a supporting role, but it's difficult for us, given all the other things that we're doing at this time, to really be the lead group on that. And then again, SCADA and Public Works will participate in that servo and virtualization change-out that we had. But I know I covered a lot of things. Hopefully I didn't use too many acronyms, and I'd be more than happy to take questions or explain or elaborate on any of those.
We have questions to my right, questions to my left. Thanks a lot, Chris, great job.
All right, moving on to buildings. Just kind of inventory, Village Hall, 3 fire stations, Police Department, the substation at Gurnee Mills, and then Public Works facility. Obviously, the approach for this group is preventative maintenance, maximize the lifespan, make the building safe for visitors and employees, and then obviously we still want them to look appealing, so work on appearance as well. Fiscal year '23 plan, $513,000, broken down by department administration. This building, about $50,000 in HVAC and miscellaneous repairs. Seems like we have that kind of placeholder every year. Police department, they have a 5-year plan that they've worked on with a consultant, so this is part of that plan, in addition to some dispatch locker upgrades. Fire department, as Chris was just mentioning, some office and building renovations that may happen in conjunction with some staffing changes. Public Works, $60,000 for HVAC, material bins, and I think there's going to be an assessment done on those, so that may change when we get to the budget. Some roof repairs and then some doors. And then continued work on the clubhouse out at Bittersweet, looking at some windows that need to be redone, and hopefully that's it. And that's the plan, so happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Trustee Russ?
Just, is there anything at Mother Red House that should be in that with the building?
We don't have anything specifically in the plan, but we do put a placeholder in the budget every year for anything that might come up, so we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, we carry money in the administration of a municipal building. And I know Public Works is going to take a look at the Bound Foundation out there to see if they can conduct some work on that next year. And if they can't do it, then we'll be looking for an outside contractor to shore that up a little bit, so that's on the radar.
Trustee Thorstensen?
Mine is more of a statement. Excuse me, I was reading, about the hacker, the log for the Apache one, Chris, and seeing all the work that you guys are doing there. And then hearing you make a statement earlier about the SCADA system upgrade that no longer kicking the can because of Heather and Nick. So I'm just calling out that as one example. Certainly it exists for police and fire as well. But we all see and read in these meetings, in the minutes and updates from Pat, the work that you're doing on a day-to-day business, but it's really nice to also see your strategic thinking and possibly some effort or hours available to you to do the strategic thinking along with your day-to-day. So just thanks for tying it together for us.
Any questions this way?
Okay, so this is just, again, first look at what staff is proposing. We'll have other opportunities going forward between now and April when we approve the budget. So if anything of consequence changes, obviously we'll let you know. And if there's something that's missing that you'd like to see in there that pops in your mind, let us know.
All right, thanks. So no old business, right?
Correct.
New business, item number 1, approval of ordinance 2022,
02?
granting a text amendment to the Gurnee zoning ordinance for Article 10.2, accessory structures and uses to prohibit the use of fabric windscreens, slats, and similar coverings, except for recreational game courts on fences in both residential and non-residential districts. Pat?
Yes, you had a memo from our associate planner, Clara Gable, on this. We were approached this summer by a couple different entities regarding their fences and whether they could use windscreen or slats. So that got staff thinking this is probably something we should take a look into a little further as far as the durability of those products and just the physical appearance of them. So staff did do that. It was before the Planning and Zoning Board on October 20th to discuss it. We reached out to some other communities, actually 14 of them, to see how they handled these windscreens and slats and chain link fence. 6 would allow them in some way, shape, or form based on various conditions, and then 8 of those communities would not allow them at all. So when the Planning and Zoning Board talked about it at their meeting, they were of the opinion that visually doesn't look the greatest, and then also concerned just about the durability with the wind blowing in the part of the country we're in, that holding up. So they were of the opinion that they should be prohibited in residential and non-residential districts, except for as it relates to recreational game courts. The reason for the recreational game courts was so that the spectators could actually be there to see through what was going on inside the game courts. So I know down in Old Plain Park with the new pickleball courts, they have it up. It's worked out well. We have confidence in the park district that if there's an issue, that they will correct it. When it comes to residents and businesses, that might be a little bit more of a challenge if there's issues. So the PZB is forwarding a unanimous favorable recommendation on these text amendments to prohibit the use of fabric windscreen slats and similar coverings on residential, non-residential fences.
Was there a motion? Oh, any question first?
Just a quick question, and Pat, I might have missed it, but there was an example of a business that we had previously approved. Do we grandfather them, or do we have to go back and?
So they are good to go going forward. As was stated in the memo, there was some provisions put in there about them staying on top of that. We've talked to the business. I don't think they're entirely happy with how it turned out, so they may be looking at some other options going forward, but we've had those communications. But they're good to go because they got in before the prohibition, so.
Trustee O'Brien first.
I may have heard it, so I don't know whether any residential properties have any of these things right now, but what happens when they break? Is there a provision in there to either have them switch or have them fix it or something like that?
Did we end up with any residential, David?
To our knowledge, we do not have any residential properties that have implemented either the slats or the windscreens to date. The ones that, the applications that we received in this fall were for residential, and that was what kind of raised the red flag.
Right, and then for the business ones that might have it, what happens going forward for the ones who are existing? Do they have to change to the new system whenever that finally breaks, or do we have a system in place?
At the point that it becomes more than maintenance and becomes a structural repair, they would have to replace it with something that would meet the current codes.
Thank you.
There's a motion by trustee Thorstensen.
Second.
Is that right? Second by trustee O'Brien. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Woodside. Ross. Gardner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2022,
03?
authorizing execution of a professional services agreement with Manhard Consulting for engineering services for Keith Avenue, Elm Road, Frontage Road, parallel of Washington Street, First Street, Oglesby Avenue, and Delaney Road improvements. Pat?
Sure. So had a memo from our assistant village engineer, Nick Leach, on this. When we went through the capital plan presentation and in the capital plan document, all those roads in orange that require reconstruction, this relates to those. So this is the design engineering for those projects. It's about 7,000 feet of roadway. Last year, the engineering division reached out to engineering firms in the area, requested a list of qualifications, and then went through and ranked those firms. Manhard was one of the firms that put in. Well-known firm in the area. They've been around since the 70s, based in Lincolnshire, have done work all over Lake County and the state. This is a firm that we haven't worked with in the past, but staff believes they are capable and would like to work with them. It provides us another firm to call upon going forward, should similar projects like this come up. So there is funding actually in the current year's budget for this design work, so we'll be ready to go after May 1, 2022. And as I said, it's those roadways that need to be reconstructed. They broke it down by a project basis. Staff worked with them on it. For what's being done, On their end, it was reasonable, so we're looking to move forward with this project. The total was $116,000.
Thank you, Pat. Is there any discussion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Woodside. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Bombas. 6 aye.
Motion carries. Item number 3, approval of Police Department recommendation to renew a public safety communications equipment maintenance agreement with Motorola Solutions for the period covering September 1, 2021 to April 30th, 2022, in the amount of $59,972.63. Pat?
Sure. So you had a memo from the police chief on this, but we also have Phil Burnell, our communications supervisor, and then Chris here, who know much more about it than either Brian or I. So we've worked with Motorola since the 80s, so have a long-standing relationship with them. Majority of the equipment that's over in the communications center has been provided by Motorola or is serviced by them. The latest agreement with Motorola of substance was back in September 2015 for new equipment over there. It was almost $1 million equipment purchase on our end. That had 5 years of maintenance included into that agreement. So that 5 years is up. We're now outside that maintenance window. So we need to re-up that maintenance contract with Motorola. They've continued to service the equipment when we've called and had issues, so that's good. But we do need to get this in place. We reached out to them before the expiration of the prior agreement. The ball's been in their court, so the delay was on their end. Finally have all the terms finalized. We requested that this be an 8-month agreement to get it on the same schedule as our fiscal year. So this will be coming back before you here sooner rather than later for May 1, 22 going forward. But at this point in time, it's an 8-month agreement, about $60,000. That comes to about $7,500 per month. The original 5-year agreement was $6,400 per month, so there is an increase, but given the amount of time that's gone by, staff believes it's reasonable. They've been a great partner, served us well over that entire relationship, so staff is happy with the performance. This is one of those items that is reimbursable by the joint ETSB. The joint ETSB has money budgeted on their end, expecting this request to come from the village, so we'll run through that process. But this is very important to the functioning of the communications center. As you know, that equipment needs to be up and running. It's life or death for those that call that center. So staff is recommending this 8-month agreement in the amount of $59,972.63. As I said, that'll take us to April 30th, and then we'll be back before you for a new agreement after that point in time.
All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion trustee Garner, second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Woodside. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Bombas.
Aye.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Item number 4, approval of Public Works Department recommendation to renew a mowing and landscape maintenance contract for Class A, B, and C sites with Siebert Landscape for 2022 and 2023, at an annual cost not to exceed $137,000. Pat?
So this is not life and death, but when these areas don't get mowed, we definitely hear about it. We've worked with Siebert for the past couple years. They've had the A and C sites since 2019, the B sites since 2020. Been a good contractor. The total acreage that they mow on behalf of us is about 125 acres, so this is a lot of right-of-ways, detention ponds, the Washington Street median, some of our facilities. So based on which class it is, whether it's an A, B, or C, that depends on the frequency of the mowing, the equipment that they need, landscaping that's involved. Jake Balmas oversees this contract. He's been happy with the work that Siebert has done. Since that contract expired, we reached out to them as far as a renewal. They came back with a one-time 3% increase on the first year, hold the second year flat with fuel prices and everything else. We think that's reasonable. There may be some tweaking within that contract as far as what they mow or don't mow, as far as properties we bring on, or some horse trading with the park district like we've done in the past. So they're looking to move forward with this contract at a not-to-exceed annual cost of $137,000 for the 2022 and then the 2023 mowing season.
there a motion?
Second.
Motion by trustee Woodside, second by trustee Ross. Roll call, please.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Woodside. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
6 aye.
Motion carries. We move to the part for public comment. If anybody would like to step to the microphone and say their name. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.